now we're going to head it over to the AFC now, where which division did you want to start with? Did you want to start with the AFC East
No,
or,
we're going
or
to
the
start
South?
with
South.
We're going to start with the South because we did
Okay.
not
Yep.
discuss the South yet. Go ahead. You
Yep.
start
Let's
us
do the
off.
South. Okay. For the South, I had the Colts winning the division at 11-6. The Titans in second at 9-8. There's just missing the playoffs. Um, the Jaguars at 4-13, and then the Texans at 3-14. Um, Starting with the Colts, I just think Matt Ryan fits this team. Not only the play style of this team, the attitude of this team, but also just the scheme. He really works well with middle of the field passing. I think he's going to thrive in their play action game. And I think he'll look fantastic behind this great Colts offensive line as well. And then defensively, um, I really like their front seven. You have Shaquille Leonard, formerly Darius Leonard, but changed his name during the offseason. DeForest Buckner wreaking havoc in the middle of that defensive line. Then you have Kwity Paye, second year player. And I believe it's still Justin Houston on the other side. I'm not entirely sure on that. I think he may have retired, but still a fantastic defensive line. Not the best in the league, but nowhere near worst in the league either. Like they're no slouch. Um, and then the secondary, I think, um, is where I think they'll thrive the most. They really um, embrace the zone system. They play a lot of cover three. Um, they really try to keep everything in front of them. They don't allow big plays. And I think with their ball control offense, that'll pay dividends. And then the Titans, I think the loss of Harold Landry that just came out a few days ago with that torn ACL, I believe, that plays a huge role in this prediction. Before that injury, I had the Titans as being one of the best front sevens in the entire NFL with Bud Dupree, with all those guys up front. Um, but now I still do have a lot of questions. I it's not that I don't think the Titans are good. I still do think they're a really good team and they could make the playoffs. But I just think in this tough AFC, um, there's a lot of games that are just kind of in the balance. Um, I think there's a few games that they could steal early. I think the opening part of the schedule is going to be extremely important to get off to a good start, particularly in the second, third, and fourth week games with the Bills, Raiders, and Colts back to back to back. Those are going to be three very important games. Then you have the Colts coming out of the bye week 7, super important, and I think that's really going to decide their season. Those two games against the Colts and that stretch, weeks 2, 3, and 4. Obviously that's super early in the season. You could say, they have a lot of time to recover. Why would you say that, their season is over if they struggle in that stretch? It's because they have the gauntlet later. Um, they're one of the divisions that plays the AFC West, I believe. No. Actually, no. They do. They do play the AFC West. And late in the year, they have the Chiefs, Broncos back to back. Chiefs, Broncos, Packers back to back to back. And then you play the Bengals, the Eagles, who I'm high on. And then you have a winnable game against the Jags. Then you play the Chargers. Um, Weeks, I'd say 9 through 12, realistically. I really think that's another stretch that could really make or break their season. I think it's going to be tough. Um, and then the Jags, I actually do think the outlook on the Jags is positive right now. For me personally, I see the roster talent, I see the foundation there, and I see where they're trying to go. But I don't think it'll translate to wins this year. But I think it'll be way more positive than anything they could have imagined last year. I think Trevor Lawrence will show signs at the very least. I think at the most you could see this team possibly get into like 6 wins, 6, 7 wins. But for me, I was just on the lower end and thought some of those possibly winnable games didn't go their way just because of how young and inexperienced they are. And then the Texans at 3-14, I really don't have much to say on them. I don't know what the outlook will be after this year. I I question a lot of things with this team. I question, where are they going to find their consistent offense? Obviously, you have Brandon Cooks and that rookie Damian Pierce, who has looked great in training camp in the preseason. But outside of that, where are you getting the big plays from? And then defensively, um, how are you gonna be able to keep things under wraps? They have a lot of young talent. I like a lot of their young talent defensively, actually, but I just don't think they're there yet. Go ahead.
Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Okay. We agree. I think once again, I have the Colts winning the division at 11-6. Titans missing out on the playoffs, but they still go 9-8. Jaguars 4-13, and the exact same record for the Texans 3-14. Starting off, I guess, with the Colts. We know that they brought in Matt Ryan. Should be an upgrade just based on what you get. You know what you get on a week-to-week basis, and you have the running game and the offensive line that this year is coming in healthier than it was last year. In the defense, I actually did not know that um, about the Darius Leonard, Shaquille Leonard situation until you brought it up. I had to look it up. He wants to be called Shaquille, which I think is his middle name, Darius Shaquille Leonard. So he didn't necessarily change his name. He's just changing what he wants to be called because that's what his family calls him. But yeah, I did not know about that. That's going to take some getting used to. But yeah, you have him on your defense if he stays healthy. With the pieces that they have, you get a guy like Matt Eberflus as your head coach. Defense is going to be well coached, and I think you're going to see less sporadic play from the quarterback position. You have one of the best running backs in the league with some nice receivers, Michael Pittman and others. So yeah, I was a believer in the Colts last year. Ultimately, things didn't work out the way I thought they would, but I think this year they'll be in the playoffs. I have the Titans barely missing out on the playoffs, but I have to believe in what I've seen from this team year after year. The consistency of a guy, a head coach like Mike Vrabel, who I think is a top 10, top 12 coach in this league. I love, even though you do lose A.J. Brown, I love you get a guy in Treylon Burks from Arkansas in the first round, along with you bring over Robert Woods. He's coming off a knee injury. He'll need to be the leader of this revamped wide receiving core. But I think eventually you're going to see some good things from Robert Woods, a reliable guy, and then Treylon Burks, who I think is going to be an absolute stud. But there will be some growing pains. And then Austin Hooper, a free agent tight end who comes over, a nice little piece there. So yes, it's not as dangerous as it once was, but I do think getting a guy like Treylon Burks is huge for this offense. And then Derrick Henry, if he's on the field, we all know that presents. So I think with that alone, and then the veteran you have at quarterback and Ryan Tannehill, what I've seen from Mike Vrabel as a head coach, and then the defense, while you lose Harold Landry, you still have Bud Dupree, you still have some other guys up front that can get the job done. And then some of the young pieces in the secondary looking to take the next step. Caleb Farley, Christian Fulton, Amani Hooker, with more of a veteran guy like Kevin Byard. So, yeah, I think it's a solid team. They'll win games. They do have a tough schedule, but I think they're capable with their head coach and the roster that they have. They're capable of winning games to keep their heads around 500, maybe even one game above 500. But I do think just with how loaded the AFC is in general, they're going to end up missing out on the playoffs. The Jaguars, I do agree. Things are looking up. I love the hire of Doug Peterson. I think he's going to do great things with Trevor Lawrence. You obviously went on an off-season spending spree to get some talent surround Trevor Lawrence with some actual NFL, ready talent, which I do like. But there are still questions. And ultimately in the AFC with the schedule that the AFC South is playing this year against the AFC West, I just think at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for the Jaguars to end up winning a lot of games. But the future is bright. And then the Texans, not really much to say on the Texans, to be honest with you. Just, I don't know, man. That's all I really can say. I do like what I've seen from the quarterback, though. I think he's got – what's his name again?
Davis Mills.
Davis Mills, yeah.
That tells you all you need to know, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think he's fine. It's just you got to be more dynamic at all positions.
Yeah, exactly. And just wanted to add one thing. To build on your point you made earlier about the Titans, I think you could make the case that Vrabel is even, a top 5-ish coach, even culture-wise. I think you could make the case for sure. I think there is the biases towards offensive coaches, and he's not that, but he's been very consistent with his teams year over year, even with all the roster turnover. So, yeah, I'm really high on Mike Vrabel, even though I do have the Titans missing out on the playoffs this year. Okay, so that's going to do it for the AFC South.
Let's move to the North.
Now, yes, let's move over to the AFC North. Let me just mark the timestamp. I'll just let you start off with the North.
All right, so for the North, I have the defending AFC champions, Cincinnati Bengals. Really like what they got. I think they got better in the offseason, 13-4. I have the Ravens making the playoffs this year as a wild card at 11-6. I have the Steelers missing the playoffs, finishing third in the division at 8-9. And then I have the Browns starting slow, but I do think they'll make a little late season run towards the end once they get Deshaun Watson back from suspension and finish 7-10 in the division or in general. So I guess I'll start with the Steelers because I guess that's just the easiest place to start for me. Look, it's Mike Tomlin. He's never had a losing season. You obviously love what you have on defense. You have playmakers at all three levels. You bring in a guy like Miles Jack, who I think will not only make the middle of this defense better, the run defense better, with what he's able to do in the running game, and we saw flashes of that in the preseason. but I think he's going to make the other guys better, the Devin Bushes of the world, who now has had a full year since that knee injury, and hopefully he'll come back healthier and better. Pairing along with a guy like Miles Jack, who's proven. You obviously have a pass rush, Cam Hayward, no signs of slowing down, TJ Watt, et cetera, et cetera. You're getting Tyson Alualu back, who hurt himself. I think it was week 1 or week 2 of last year. Cannot be understated how critical he is to this defense. And I think he's going to solve some of the run defense issues that we had last year up front. Just could not stop the run. And I'm expecting a big step this year from a guy like Alex Highsmith opposite of TJ Watt. So you have a playmaker at all 3 levels with TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Miles Jack at the linebacker position, and then obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick. And a guy that came on late last year, the number 1 cornerback, brought him over from Seattle, and Ahkello Witherspoon with a defensive head coach. And don't forget, they added Brian Flores to that defensive coaching staff. Cannot be understated. So you love what you see on defense right now from the Steelers. Saw some good things in training camp from the quarterback position. And you do have pieces that you like. It's a really young offense. Most of the guys, with the exception of, I think, Deontay Johnson and maybe the right tackle, Chukso Okorafor, and, the veteran guys they brought in on the offensive line, and, of course, Mitch Trubisky. Most of the other guys are playing on their rookie deals. I think you're going to see good things from Mitch Trubisky. I think you're going to see some not so great things from Mitch Trubisky. But I think in those good weeks, with the upgraded weaponry that he has, and just the, I don't know, what you see from the Steelers year in, year out, being competitive with this defense that they have, they'll be able to win some games. They'll be hanging around 500 all year. But the more and more I watch the offensive line during the preseason, I know it's a preseason, but the more and more I watched it, I just can't say that this team, with how bad the offensive line was in the preseason, who knows, maybe it gets better somehow. There's still time. There's some free agents out there on the market to improve the left tackle position. But right now, the offensive line just isn't good enough to me right now with a bridge quarterback like Mitch Trubisky or a rookie in Kenny Pickett, who I do think eventually we're going to see at some point this season. So that's my view on the Steelers. Good defense, good coaching staff. They'll be hanging around 500 all year. They'll be a competitive team. They're really never a complete disaster. I mean, even when they had Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, they still found a way to win 8 games. And I think Mr. Trubisky is for sure an upgrade over those pieces. And they've upgraded, I think, at the skill positions. Najee Harris, over a guy like James Conner, who they had in those last couple of years with Roethlisberger. George Pickens, watch out. I'm telling you right now, he's a stud. Johnson, who just signed a 2-year contract extension, and then Claypool's the guy I'm really looking at. If you don't watch out, Claypool, you're going to lose your job to George Pickens. And then Freiermuth, I'm expecting a big year from him at the tight end position. So, yeah, that's my view on the Steelers. From a Ravens perspective, look, this team had a ton of injuries last year, and I think at one point in the season they were 8-3 before their team basically just fell apart. I do not like that you have the the Lamar Jackson whole contract situation hanging over this team's head, or just up there in thin air going into the season. But I trust John Harbaugh, like what they have on defense, love some of the young receivers, Devin Duvernay, some of the other guys that they have. What's his name? Rashad Bateman. I think he's going to have a big year. Mark Andrews is a fantastic tight end. The offensive line is fine. You're going to have a guy like J.K. Dobbins, hopefully healthy for most of the year. So, yeah, I think they stay healthy. There's no reason. I mean, they were on a pace to make the playoffs last year. I don't think there's any reason they shouldn't be in the playoffs, whether it's 10-7, 11-6, whatever it may be. With Deshaun Watson within division, with the uncertainty the Steelers have at the quarterback position, the offensive line. I don't know, man. I think the Ravens will be a playoff team, 11-6, 4-2 in the division, and then I have the Bengals, 13-4, winning the division. Love what Joe Burrow was able to do. I think they got better on the offensive line marginally, but even getting better marginally, I think will be good enough to elevate this team to another level. And I believe in the pass rush. Trey Hendrickson, the other guy they have on the other side. But yeah, I think they had a good draft. But I still have a little bit of I still have some questions about Zach Taylor, whether he can really coach. But I do think, look, he proved it last year. This team made a playoff run, and that's just – I think Joe Burrow is just it, man. He's got that it factor. He's going to win this team games. His mobility within the pocket, even if that offensive line isn't perfect. I don't know. I think the Bengals – with the step that we saw the defense take last year, I think they're about to take another step with some of the moves that they made. So that's just my perspective.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I'll start from the bottom this time. I had the Browns at 7-10, at the bottom of the division. Um, I do have them, making a small run to close the year with Deshaun Watson, but I just I don't think there's going to be enough momentum for them to really make any noise, and they're going to be too far behind anyway. And I also have questions about how he'll look as well. He hasn't played a regular season game in 2 years. And then the Steelers, I have them at 8-9, right, like kind of right around what you said as well. Hanging around 500, remaining extremely competitive. I think this defense is going to be better than last year, as you said, with the changes they made, or with the uh, player they're bringing back in the middle. You mentioned his name earlier. I struggle with his name. Anyways, he was mentioned earlier, and then obviously bring the addition of Miles Jack as well. I think they're going to be a feisty team, and they're going to be, they're going to ruin some contending teams' days here and there. I think that'll happen once or twice this year. And then I have the Bengals coming in second in the division at 11-6, and then I have the Ravens at 12-5, winning the division. For me, the reason I have the Ravens winning the division is I just think their defense is going to be fantastic, and I think they're going to be leaning into what they do on offense, which is, last couple of years they were trying to, go away from it and, prove that we can pass in the pocket and all this type of stuff. This year it's no, we're going to do what we do best, and we're going to embrace that running, tough-minded power football that we got to the 1 seed with. We got Lamar Jackson MVP with, and I think with bringing that style of football back, I think there's a lot of games where teams won't know how to adjust to that style of play since it's such a rare style of play. So I think in the regular season, it will bode extremely well for them. Um, and then the Bengals, um, I really I don't really have any particular reason why they're second in the division compared to the Ravens. I think their rosters are comparable there. I think you really can't go wrong either way here. I'm just personally high on the Ravens, and I think they're hungry. They have something to prove, and as you said, they were 8-3 before their season fell apart. They're leading the division, um, and then things kind of things went haywire. So I think they're a team on a mission, so to speak. And that's not to say that the Bengals are not. I'm high on the Ravens. That's the bottom line. Um, the Bengals are fantastic. I love the moves they made as well. I just think uh, they they play a lot of good teams, man. And I think there's going to be hiccups here and there, and it's not because they don't have the roster talent. I think it'll be more so maybe just boredom than anything. I think they're just hungry to get to the playoffs, and then that's when they'll really make their noise in the playoffs. Um, they play a lot of Super Bowl contending teams, so I'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see, how they respond to that, how Joe Burrow does behind this better offensive line, and if there's any team I could be wrong about, the Bengals are probably at the top of the list because I'm probably lower on them than most people are. And then the bottom two teams, not much to be said. I kind of said it earlier with the Steelers and the Browns. Yeah, I have questions about the quarterback situation. Their roster is good. You there? Okay, guys. I think we're having some technical difficulties. So I'm gonna I'm gonna pause the recording here, and we're gonna get back to it in a few minutes. So stick around. We're still gonna finish up here. Thanks for the patience. All right, guys, we are back. Thanks so much for your patience. We're going to continue on here with the AFC West here. We're on to our last two divisions, and then we're going to get into the playoff stuff briefly, and then we're going to close out the show. So, the AFC West, the division you've probably all been waiting for, intrigued about. I have the Chiefs winning the division at 12-5. I have the Chargers also at 12-5, but with a worse division record, ultimately being the reason they lose out. And then I have the Broncos at 10-7, squeaking into the playoffs. And then the Raiders also at 10-7, but with a worse division record than the Broncos, which is why they will miss out on the playoffs. So okay, the Chiefs for me. I'm high on the Chiefs, and to me, it's a similar reasoning to what I had with the Packers. It's the diversified skill sets on this receiving core. I think ultimately, the top end talent um, is going to be gone, and those crazy explosive plays that you saw from Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, that's not going to be there anymore. But um, like I said before, more diversified talent on this receiving core. And I think it's ultimately a better overall receiving core. Um, and, there were some games last year where the Chiefs laid stinkers because they were able to stop Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey, and then they didn't have anything else to go to other than those two guys. So this year, I think those stinker games won't be there as much, and the explosive crazy ones won't be there as much, but ultimately it will even out, and I think they'll overall have a better, more consistent passing game, in my opinion. And then defensively, I really love what they did defensively. I think this defense is going to be much improved. over last year. Um, if you look at what they were able to bring in terms of defensive talent all over that like secondary and front seven. George Karlaftis leading the way, obviously, absolute stud. A guy that I thought was a top 20 player in this draft class. Um, has shown that to be the case so far in the preseason, but whether that translates to the regular season is yet to be the case. But I'm extremely optimistic about George Karlaftis, and is that he's actually my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year, if you were wondering about that. But they also drafted Trent McDuffie, a guy who I also had in the first round. Um, and this defense is young, but you know they're cohesive, and I think Steve Spagnuolo, since he's been with the Chiefs, this is the best defensive roster he's had on this team. Obviously, you still have Chris Jones, you still have Frank Clark. Um, I think this defense is going to be, top 12. There's going to be rough games here and there, but they're going to be a good defense. And paired with a Patrick Mahomes-led offense, you can do the math. That's why I have them winning the division. And then the Chargers, I think they're fantastic as well. But ultimately, I just had them losing that one extra division game. I think really you could go either way on who could win the division here, but I chose the Chiefs because they're the team to beat on the block. And going with the gut here, I had to because the teams are so comparable. I had to just bet on who I know has done it until proven otherwise. Um, and that isn't the case with my prediction for the teams in the lower part of the division, but that's another subject for another day. Or that's another subject for right now. Um, Now, getting to the Broncos, I have it 10-7. I'm higher on the Broncos than a lot of people are, and that's not to say that people are low on their roster talent. I think people think their roster is fantastic. I just think it's fair that people have them missing out on the playoffs in this division because their schedule is absolutely insane. I think it's fair to have your questions, especially with a new coaching staff, new quarterback, um, a ton of roster talent moving around, and also a receiving core that has yet to really prove themselves to be consistent, whether that be because of the quarterback situation or because of injury or drop issues or whatever the case may be. They just haven't proven themselves quite enough to really solidify themselves in terms of predictions. But I'm high on them because us as a podcast, we've historically been super high on Russell Wilson. And I think he's clearly the third best quarterback in this division. Well, arguably. And on any given day, he could be the best quarterback in this division. I truly believe that. And I think a lot of people are doubting Russell Wilson right now. And I think they're going to regret that. I think he's going to have a fantastic season. Um, I really do believe that. I think he's going to bounce back completely from that finger injury. I think he just came back too early last year. I think he was rusty. He wasn't fully healthy. And now he's on a better roster, better offensive line. And I think he's going to uh, prove himself. One thing I do question is late in December, though, with when it gets cold in Denver, how will he fare at that point? But we'll get to that when we get to that. Um, and the Raiders, I just had missing the playoffs. Um, really just gut decision here, like I said. Um, it really comes down to their offensive line. I I expect that offensive line to be absolutely horrid. And then defensively, they just traded away Trayvon Mullen, who was their best cornerback, in my opinion. So that adds on to the questions I already had about their secondary. I thought their defense would have been solid with Trayvon Mullen. Um, you know, a little bit matchup dependent, but solid. I really like Gus Bradley. But wait, no, Gus Bradley left. I really like Patrick Graham. Excuse me. But I just, I don't know. I just, I gotta see it again. And I know they did last year. They made the playoffs, but this AFC is different, and it's gonna take a lot to make the playoffs, especially in this division.
There are teams every year. You look at the turnover year to year from teams who made the playoffs the previous year to teams who make the playoffs the next year. There are always 1 to 2 teams in each conference, if not more than that, sometimes 3 teams that made the playoffs last year that don't end up making it this year. And it could be for a variety of reasons. The division gets tougher, the teams in the conference get better. There's a surprise team here and there. There are some injuries there and there. It happens year to year. You get, 1 or 2 at the very minimum new teams in the playoffs. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for the AFC, I think the Steelers and the Raiders, teams that made the playoffs, snuck in wildcard spots last year, are going to end up missing out this year. Not because they're bad teams per se, just because they either have one. Well, first of all, the AFC is just an absolute gauntlet. And then second of all, they both have like one similar glaring hole on their roster, and it's the offensive line. And I just don't think with the pass rushes you see nowadays, it's sustainable to win like that. But who knows? I could be wrong. But yeah, we actually have a very similar, very, very similar. In fact, the exact same prediction at the top of the division. Kansas City winning it at 12-5. Chargers 12-5 as well, as a wild card, along with the Broncos at 11-6. Where do I start? I guess I'll start with the Chiefs. Look, we'll start on the defensive side because that's what I think you really touched on. You brought up some very good points. I personally don't know as much about George Karlaftis. I've seen a little bit of him here and there, and I think he's going to be a pretty good player for them. They obviously have Chris Jones, who needs to stay healthy, but is a fantastic player and difference maker, a destructive force on the inside. He's fought through some injuries in recent seasons, but if he stays healthy, along with Frank Clark, Karlaftis, the rookie, and Derek Nottie, the front four is good. Love the young linebacker core, to be honest with you. I think
To mention them,
Willie Gay and Nick Bolton out of Missouri, both third and fourth year players respectively, very athletic, can do a lot of different things in this linebacking core. And the guy that they drafted out of Wisconsin in this year's draft, Leo Chenal, a little bit more limited in what he can do, but he'll give them some depth at that position at the very least. And then the secondary, yes, you do lose Tyrann Mathieu, who was sort of a linchpin in the secondary, but Justin Reed is a younger, versatile, good player that you replace him with coming over from Houston. And then you have Trent McDuffie, who's unproven. He's a rookie, but we expect good things from him. L'Jarius Sneed and Juan Thornhill, who is an underrated player as well, out of Virginia. So, yeah, this defense, I think you said it best. This is probably the best defense that they've had. And I think, at the very least, it'll make up for maybe some of the issues that they may have offensively, considering this is a new receiving core without Tyreek Hill. But Andy Reid, I don't think people get the impact that Andy Reid has on this team and on this offense in particular. Mahomes is still the king at quarterback. This offensive line's fantastic, left to right. Orlando Brown, Creed Humphrey, I think, is eventually maybe going to be the best center in football. He's already a top 5 center in football coming out of Oklahoma. That was a fantastic draft pick. They obviously went out and got Joe Tooney at left guard last year in free agency, upgraded this offensive line. Andrew Wiley at right tackle, versatility, toughness. He can play both guard and tackle if they need him to. And then obviously Trey Smith at the right guard position as well. He's just a run mauler in the run game. And I think, coming into his second year out of the University of Tennessee, could be a future like Pro Bowler on this offensive line. I mean, this offensive line is, barring injury, is going to be fantastic. And then I think this goes back to the conversation we had earlier, the variation of skill sets within this receiving core. Of course, you still have Travis Kelce. You have your possession receiver now in Juju Smith-Schuster, which you somewhat did not have that type of player last year. And if he's healthy, which he is, when he's healthy, he's a productive player. Valdez-Scantling will give you some speed, a vertical threat downfield. He averaged 17.5 yards per catch last year. So you're not really losing much in terms of a vertical threat. You have McCole Hardman, the speedster, who you can use in a lot of different ways. And then Sky Moore. I think he's going to be very good. So, yeah, I really don't see this Chiefs team offensively or defensively losing a step at all. I think they're going to be 12-5, and they're going to be, they'll have a home playoff game or two for sure. They'll win this division. But the Chargers, man, did they have an offseason, especially on the defensive side. What are you smirking at?
A funny thought popped in my head. Someone had made a reference earlier on Twitter, like Sky Moore is a player that comes from straight out of Andy Reid's dreams, like right next to the Kansas City barbecue and cheeseburgers. You got Sky Moore, right there, speed. So yeah, sorry.
Back to the Chargers though. From an offensive perspective, Justin Herbert has had some of the best first 2 years statistically from a quarterback that we've ever seen. Now, there's been some weird things happen in this organization. They found ways to lose games that they're not supposed to, which has kept them out of the playoffs. But I think this year it's going to be different. I really do. Obviously, love what they have at receiver. Keenan Allen, still very nice. 5 straight seasons with 95 or more catches. That's the second longest such streak in NFL history. So he's an absolute witch at receiver, along with Mike Williams, the more vertical threat. And obviously, big target in the red zone. You bring in Gerald Everett, who really had a good year last year with Seattle. Career highs in catches, yards, and touchdowns. Along with a guy I think a lot of people are overlooking in Jalen Guyton, who showed flashes last year out of North Texas. I love what they have weapon-wise. The offensive line got better, I believe, with the draft. First-round pick, Zion Johnson, the right guard out of Boston College. He's going to be a fixture on this offensive line, along with the guy they drafted last year, Rashawn Slater, at that left tackle position on this offensive line. You have an all-pro center in Corey Linsley, a veteran guard in Matt Filer, who's experienced, proficient in both the pass and run game. And I know that because he started his career in Pittsburgh and was very solid. And then Storm Norton at the right tackle position. Started 15 games. Last year was pretty solid. It's probably the weak link on this offensive line, but as a whole, I think they're going to be fantastic. And with Austin Eckler and what they have at the running back position, getting Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M. Yeah, this offense is going to be explosive, and the defense got a lot better, especially up front. You get a guy like Khalil Mack, and then on the back end, you shore up that secondary. Derwin James, of course, you lock him down. You give him a contract extension. Asante Samuel's a fantastic second-year player out of Florida State. Expect a big jump from him. And then J.C. Jackson, you bring him over from the Patriots to be your number one guy at the cornerback spot, that shutdown corner that you really covet, especially in this division where there's so many weapons. You're going to have to go against Devontae Adams now twice a year. The receivers that the Broncos have, Cortland Sutton and others, and then, of course, the Chiefs, what that presents and what the AFC as a whole presents in terms of guys who can make plays at the receiver position. It's a luxury to have a guy like J.C. Jackson who can shut those guys down or do a good enough job at that cornerback spot. So, yeah, I think upgraded pass rush, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. I'm expecting big things from Kenneth Murray. We'll have to see, but I think he's going to do some good things this year. And then, yeah, I just think top to bottom, this roster is probably top 5, top 6 in the league if you really look at it. They're great at quarterback. They have great receivers, good offensive line that's gotten a lot better. They've really committed to improving that offensive line through the draft, and they've hit on those picks. In the defense, you signed 2 major pieces. So I don't, that's going to really help. So yeah, I think the Chargers will end up, maybe it's 11-6, maybe it's 12-5, but I do think they're going to get into the playoffs this year. And when they do, depending on how healthy they are and what it looks like, I know it's going to be Justin Herbert's first go-round in the playoffs if they do get there, but I think he's ready for it. So yeah, they're going to be dangerous. I have the Broncos at 11-6. To me, it still blows my mind that Russell Wilson hasn't gotten a single MVP vote in his career. I think that's probably the most outrageous thing I've ever that I can think of in today's NFL. I think he's going to be fantastic. He's a workaholic on and off the field. He's got a better roster now. You mentioned it. I mean, all those young weapons offensively, along with an improved offensive line in this defense. I think Denver's going to be good. They're going to find ways to win. I think they can win in different ways. And I just think if you're lower on Denver than most people are, it's because of probably, number one, the uncertainty at head coach and what that potentially looks like. And then number two, probably just a little bit of recency bias based on what you saw Russell Wilson look like last year and the fact that he's getting older, just signed a massive contract extension that may, limit some of the things that they can do to improve this roster in the future. But, yeah, I do think Denver, you win, 7 games with Drew Lock. I think huge upgrade at quarterback. We've seen with this Denver team in the past. You bring in a guy like Peyton Manning, you have the roster already there, you go win games. I just think there's too much talent, and I had them sneaking into the playoffs as the last wildcard team at 11-6. And then the Raiders, I still have them above 500, 9-8. I think the offense is going to be really good. Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, the tight end, Darren Waller, Derek Carr. We know what we get from him. He's a top 10, top 12 quarterback in the league, in my opinion. But the offensive line, as you said, is a huge question mark. And there are still some uncertainties on that defense, especially in the back end. We saw what they can do from a pass rush perspective last year, and that's huge. That can help your secondary, but I got to see it before I believe it. But I still think there are going to be weeks where you're just not going to be able to stop. I think this Raiders offense is going to have some big weeks here and there, and I think the defense will do enough. They'll be hanging around 500. It's tough playing in this division, but I think 9-8, somewhere in there, is reasonable. Um, I am interested to see what this offense looks like now under the direction of Josh McDaniels, their new head coach. That's another question too.
Yeah, yeah. With the Raiders, I think a key point that I saw from a YouTuber I watch, that franchise guy, he's an NFL analyst. I highly recommend his stuff, by the way. One thing he said is the Raiders are kind of built like a fantasy team, like where
Yes.
they're built to where you have a lot of star power in the flashy positions, but you don't have, the they're squishy in the middle of
Yes.
both
Yes.
lines, where
Right.
the heart of your football team is the line of scrimmage. That's how you win in November and December in the tough division games, in the tough cold weather games, and that's where I question them.
Absolutely. So now, guys, we know this is a long podcast. I always say it's not going to last long, but it does. But ball season, we're talking football here. So on to our last division, uh, the AFC East. I'll let you get us started.
Yeah, for the AFC East, I had the Buffalo Bills coming at the number one seed in the AFC at 13-4. Then I had the Patriots at 9-8, the Dolphins as well at 9-8, both 3-3 in the division, and then I had the Jets at 5-12. So I'll start at the bottom for this division. For the Jets, um, it's really sad what happened in the preseason with Zach Wilson. They were really looking to build momentum as a franchise. That's what they've been missing for so long. Um, to me, the key to any rebuild in any sport really is once you draft the young talent, once you bring in the young talent, you've got to put it together on the field enough to where the players start believing, the organization starts believing, and ultimately things start snowballing in the right direction. And with the injury that Zach Wilson has, I'm just kind of worried that it will just be nagging throughout the entire season, and that's really going to hold them back here. That's why I have them at 5-12. And I do really like this roster too. I made that pretty clear in the AFC East preview, which you'll be seeing soon, by the way. That will be coming out tonight. Um, but yeah, I it's kind of sad what happened with that. But hopefully I'm wrong. And then the Dolphins at 9-8. I actually do think that's kind of a hot take having the Dolphins at 9-8 behind the Patriots. Well, even though they're with the same record. For me, it just came down to I still have questions about their offensive line, even with the additions of Teron Armstead and Connor Williams. In those other three spots, I still have questions. And also, um, I have questions about just their ability to, have consistency against those really good teams with Tua at quarterback. I think Tua hasn't shown to be able to, you know, beat the good teams. It's very similar to how we saw the Browns a few years ago when, like, I think it was Baker Mayfield going into his second year. People were really high on the Browns, and we were kind of just like they haven't beaten any good teams yet, and that's where I'm at with the Dolphins right now. They improved a lot offensively. They brought in a lot of talent, and I think that will show itself. But last year they had an absolute toilet bowl of a schedule. Um, so They got to prove it to me. This AFC is incredibly tough, as we've said a million times already. Um, and I just think they got to prove it. I wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs, but I still think it's going to take a lot. And then the Patriots, I think they're a feisty team. I think they're going to be Patriot-like. They're not going to give away games, so to speak. They're going to be in it. Um, their defense is still going to be good. I just question their offensive explosiveness and their ability to, just hang tight with, a shootout. There's going to be games where you're in a shootout. That's just the reality of today's NFL, and I question their ability to, to do that at a high level. Um, so I have them at 9-8, missing the playoffs. That's the one I feel more confident about. Out of those teams at 9-8, I feel more confident about the Patriots, and then the Bills. I have at 13-4, dominant in the division. They have the Dolphins number. That's why I say that. Um, and I expect them. I think it's one seed or bust. I think the playoffs have to come through Buffalo if they want to make the Super Bowl. I just don't think, like, if you're Buffalo, you don't want to have to go to Kansas City again. You don't want to have to go to Cincinnati. You don't want to have to go to Baltimore. You got to get home field advantage. And I think they get it. I think they get it done this year. Um, the addition of Von Miller, the offensive line is still good. You still have Josh Allen, who everybody seems to be high on right now, for good reason. And Gabriel Davis as well. I'm expecting, a big jump from him in his third year in the league. So this Bills team is fantastic, and they're a top Super Bowl contender for a reason.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have the Bills at 14-3. That seems a little high to me, looking back on it. But look, I think the Bills are potentially the favorite, not only in the AFC, but to win it all, to win the Super Bowl. And if not, I think it's boom or bust. It's gotten to that point, as you said, with what they have at the receiver position. Stephon Diggs, Gamer, Gabriel Davis. We saw what he can do last year in the playoffs. I think he's going to step up. Jamison Crowder, and then Dawson Knox, solid tight end. And then they drafted another guy out of Boise State. I'm forgetting his name, but maybe he sees the field as well. I think it's Khalil Shakir. Who knows?
Yep.
They can make something out of him too.
Like
To me, it's really, what do we get from this running game? You draft James Cook. You still have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, I believe. You haven't gotten a ton of production consistently, from the running back position in years past. If they can run the football better from a traditional running standpoint from those running back positions, and I do, I do love the draft pick of James Cook, and not have much of that onus fall on Josh Allen, even though he's capable of doing it. This offense is going to be really hard to stop with what Josh Allen is as a quarterback. And then defensively, get Von Miller, who had 9 sacks in 13 games last year. A really productive veteran player. Slot him into this front seven with Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, and some other AJ Epinesa, the guy they drafted 2 years back out of Iowa. Tremaine Edmonds, underrated middle linebacker in my opinion. And then that secondary, still one of the best safety tandems in the league with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Tre'Davious White's coming back off a torn ACL, so that should make their secondary better. And then they have some younger players in that secondary who I'm looking forward to seeing possibly play, including the rookie out of Florida, Kaiir Elam, who was a first-round pick. The Bills top to bottom are stacked. 14 games might be a little ambitious. I can acknowledge that, but I think they're good enough. there's any team good enough to do it, I think it's the Bills.
I agree.
The Dolphins, I'm a little higher on the Dolphins than a lot of people are. I have them going 10-7 and missing the playoffs, which may surprise people. I think most people would say, okay, if this team takes the next step, they win 10 or 11 games, they're probably going to make the playoffs. But guess what? That's just the reality of the AFC. With the AFC West, where you have 4 teams who could potentially make the playoffs. The AFC North, where you have 2, maybe even 3 teams that can make the playoffs, or that are capable of making the playoffs at least. And then the AFC South, where you have the Titans and Colts. Yeah, that's just a reality. You might win 9 or 10 games in this conference and miss out on the playoffs. But look, I have my questions about the offensive line. That's fair. But I think what you're going to see with Mike McDaniels, now an offensive head coach, Gerald Everett, the quarterback's coach, and some other coaches they have on the staff, Tua, we know he's limited. We know he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But I think with speedsters that they've added at the wide receiver position, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle coming into another year, and then Cedric Wilson, a nice number 3 guy, got him for 3 years, $22.8 million after a career year he had last year in Dallas. With the speed that they have, I think you're going to see them utilized in a lot of different ways, not necessarily always throwing the ball deep, because that's not necessarily what Tua does. But, you can get the ball to these guys in space, and they're going to make plays for you. They have that explosive component if they need it. The offensive line is going to be better. Question is how much better, and what does it look like from a Tua standpoint? And then obviously the running game, it's been fine the past couple of years. Chase Edmonds, 2-year, $12 million contract, upgrade at the running back spot, I think, with some of the things he can do in the passing game, along with Myles Gaskin. And I believe they also brought in Sony Michel.
And Raheem Mostert.
And Raheem Mostert. So look, I think with an offensive head coach and some of these weapons, and what Tua has shown in the past, being a high completion percentage guy, although he's limited in what he can do from like a athletic, outside the pocket, off script, making plays standpoint, I think they went 9-8 last year, and I think that's enough to take them to a next step in terms of regular season wins, as far as regular season wins are concerned. The defense, it's a well-coached defense. They have some younger players in that secondary, but Xavier Howard, Pro Bowl cornerback, 23 picks in the past 4 years. I think he's one of the NFL's top ball hawks. Really like Brandon Jones, the guy out of Texas, who's really come into his own in the secondary, along with Byron Jones and Javon Holland, who's a guy they drafted last year out of Oregon. He had a superb rookie year. 10 passes defended, 3 fumbles, 2.5 sacks, and 2 picks. I think he's going to take another step. They do lose Brian Flores, who I think had a lot to do with what we saw with this defense in past years, but I still think with the talent they have on the defense, Emmanuel Ogbah, who led this team in quarterback hits and sacks last year, Christian Wilkins, a now veteran guy out of Clemson, who had 10 tackles for loss last year, and then Raekwon Davis in the middle of that defense. I still think they're going to be a well-coached defense, and I think they upgraded enough in offensive talent to where I think you're going to see a step up from Tua, and with an offensive head coach now, you go from winning 9 games last year to 10 games this year. I don't think that's an outrageous thing to say. And then the Patriots, I'm probably going to get my ass busted for this because every time I'm low on the Patriots, they end up proving me wrong. I have them going 8-9, hanging around 500 all year, but I just can't get over um, the fact that number one, there's nobody now that Josh McDaniels has left with experience calling plays on the offensive side of the football on this coaching staff right now. They have no declared defensive coordinator, although I don't think that matters as much as the fact that they have no declared offensive coordinator. And they don't have a guy on this coaching staff who has experience calling plays at the NFL level. And I question some of their ability to be dynamic offensively. I know they're going to have a good running game, solid offensive line. Their defense is going to keep them in games. And they usually know when to move off their star players. And they usually have guys step up. But I don't know. They'll probably prove me wrong. Mac Jones, fantastic rookie season. Maybe he does it again. Maybe he takes that next step. Maybe this receiving core is better than I'm giving it credit for. But I just don't see it. But again, the Patriots probably proved me wrong once again. And then the Jets, I have them at 4-13. Don't know how long Zach Wilson's going to be out. We'll see. I think you are going to see some good things from Zach Wilson this year with some of the moves that they made offensively. Really love their running back group. Some of the guys they have in the backfield right now, along with some of the receivers they have as well. But yeah, it's just they're sort of in still the early stages of a rebuild. I think this year you could potentially see them if Zach Wilson really plays well and some of these offensive pieces step up. You could see them potentially win 6 or 7 games. But I just got to see it first. So that's how I have the AFC East shaking out.
Okay, yeah, yeah, pretty similar between us right there. Um, I'd say the Dolphins is the question mark. I think um, best case scenario, they're challenging, for 11, 12 wins. I think I'd say worst case scenario is, they're around 500 and Tua isn't the guy. I
Right.
think that's probably the worst case scenario because this roster is, even if Tua doesn't play up to par, I think that this roster is good enough to hang around 500. So that'll be interesting to see. I think that's one of the big question marks of any team going into this season. But let's get into our playoff brackets and wrap this thing up. This is a massive podcast. So let's just run through this real quick. I'll just go through my wild cards. I'll go through my wild card weekend. You go through your wild card weekend. We switch off, and we'll go through this pretty quickly here. AFC side for the wild card weekend, I have Chargers versus Colts, or 5 seed Chargers versus 4 seed Colts, um, Bengals versus 3 seed Kansas City Chiefs, and then Broncos versus Ravens. I have the upset in the first game. I actually do have the Colts beating the Chargers at home. I think their style of play matches up really well with the Chargers. Their physical brand of football. The Chargers are more comfortable in those high scoring, super, air it out you know, type of teams. They're built to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They're built to beat the Buffalo Bills. But a team like the Colts, who's just going to run it right down your throat with Jonathan Taylor, um, I've got the Colts winning that game. And then Bengals Chiefs, I think that could be the game of the year. I'm going to go with the Chiefs to get their revenge, win at home in that wild card game. And then Broncos Ravens, I struggle with this one a little bit, but ultimately I'm going to go with the Broncos. Another upset. There's always upsets in Wild Card Weekend. You could call me crazy if you wanted to. I know I said I was super high on the Ravens, but I also mentioned earlier that I said it would bode well for them in the regular season. If you caught that, that was kind of foreshadowing for what I thought would happen. Um, so NFC side, I have the Rams moving on against the Saints. I have the 49ers moving on against the Eagles in that upset, in that 6-3 matchup. And then I have Green Bay beating the Vikings in that 2-7 matchup.
All right. So I think for me, I have the Colts and the Chargers once again in the 4-5 matchup. I think I'm going to take the Chargers in that game just because it's way too early. But
Yeah,
just from a quarterback standpoint, I think they're more dynamic. The more dynamic
that's
offense.
fair.
I understand. I understand the concerns. From an interior perspective, the Colts might be better in some areas there, but I think eventually, based on what I saw last year in the playoffs, you got to be able to air it out. You got to be able to be explosive, and I'm just not sure the Colts are that right now. But I do think they'll make that a competitive game. That will sure be a game that, if it happens, will probably be close in the fourth quarter. Um, so yeah, that's what I have. I think I have the Ravens as the sixth seed, and they will be playing the uh, who do they have? I had the
Was it the Bengals or was it the Chiefs?
no, it was the Chiefs.
Okay.
Yeah, no, is that right?
Yeah, it would be Ravens Chiefs then, because I remember you said you had the Bengals at 12 wins, I think.
Yeah.
Depends on the tiebreaker
So
you had. Um,
Ravens Chiefs. Look, it's Lamar Jackson. Still haven't seen much from him from a playoff standpoint. I do think the Ravens. I'm high on the Ravens like you are, and who knows? But the Chiefs, as we mentioned, from a defensive standpoint, they're the best they've ever been, I believe. And I do think they have the advantage, not only from a defensive standpoint, but at the receiver positions. And for me, I just got to see it at the end of the year. How healthy are the Ravens? And what does this offense look like with some young, talented receivers, but some unproven receivers as well? And then I had the Bengals against the Broncos in my other wild card matchup. Bengals the 2 seed, Broncos sneaking in the playoffs as a 7 seed, and I have the Bengals winning that game. Although I do think that game could be close as well. And then from a NFC standpoint, I think I had the Eagles against the Vikings, 4-5 matchup. For me, I think that's tough. I think I'm going to go with the Vikings. I'm just higher on the Vikings than some people are. My 3-6 matchup was the Buccaneers, and I think it was the. See, my web page cut out, so I'm afraid to refresh it. So I don't have the predictions up in front of me anymore. So I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. I think
mhm.
I had the yeah. So I had the Buccaneers. I'm forgetting who I had in the wild
Let's
card.
see. I think you had. Was it the Saints or was it
No.
the Niners?
Yeah, it's the Niners.
Okay.
That's who it was. Uh, Tampa Bay and San Francisco. Interesting matchup here, but with the uncertainty at the quarterback position, don't bet against the GOAT. I have the Buccaneers winning that game. And then my two my 2-7 matchup, I believe, um, was the Packers and the Cardinals, and I have the Packers coming out on top in that one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the divisional round. For me, uh, it's going to be the Colts at the Chiefs. I'm going to take the Chiefs in that game. I think a lot of the things you could say about the Chargers matchup wise against the Colts, you could also say about the Chiefs as well. But the difference is, to me, the Chiefs have been there and done that, and they've been able to win in the playoffs in different ways. And that's to me is where the difference lies. And they're also at home. The Colts had the home field advantage against the Chargers in my bracket. So I had the Chiefs moving on there. And then the Broncos, the 7 seed Broncos against the number 1 seed Buffalo Bills. I think that could be a fantastic game. I don't think I mentioned this earlier when I picked the Ravens. One of the reasons, well, when I picked the Broncos, one of the reasons was I just think if they do make the playoffs like they do in this scenario, I think at this point they're battle tested because of their schedule, and also they probably have some momentum. So I expect that to be a great game, but I'm going to go with the Bills because they do have that home field advantage, and I think they're just more explosive as well. And I think that Bills defense can slow down um, those Broncos receivers. I like that Bills secondary a lot, as we mentioned earlier. And then the NFC side, you have the Rams at Lambeau Field take on the Packers. Um, that's a tough one, but I am going to take the Packers in that matchup. Um, the X factor in that game is obviously Aaron Donald. You never know how he can change a game. It's always up in the air there. But I think going against a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I think he'll be able to get the ball out quickly and be efficient, and by that point, hopefully have all the chemistry with his receivers all mapped out. And then I have the 49ers and the Bucks. Um, Pretty self-explanatory. I'm taking the Bucks to move on to the NFC Championship game.
Okay, I wrote it out. I have the number 1 seed Bills going up against the 5 seeded Chargers. I got to take the Bills in that game, just because I think the Chargers get into the playoffs. They have an impressive year, but going into Buffalo in that hostile environment with the talent that the Bills have, they've been here, done that already, and it's their year, I believe. I have the Bills winning that game, and then obviously I had this game one round later, but I do have a rematch of the AFC Championship game here um, with the Bengals and the Chiefs. But this year, I do think the Chiefs get it done. I think it's hard to go back to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years, obviously. And although the Bengals will have the home field in this game, I'm picking the upset with Mahomes getting his revenge. So we get another Bills Chiefs matchup in the AFC Championship game. Um, and then the NFC, Rams Vikings. Vikings once again higher on them than most people. I think they'll win a game in the playoffs, but I think the Rams are a better football team right now. So I have the Rams moving on, and then the Packers and the Bucks. This is probably the toughest game to pick for me, but I'm not going to bet against the GOAT Tom Brady. I'm going to take the Bucks.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay, moving on to the conference championship games. Starting with the AFC, I have the Chiefs and the Bills. Um, so tough, but this scenario, the Bills do have home field advantage, and I just think it's their year. I think it's their time to get it done. I think um, they're battle tested now. They've had their experience in the playoffs, and I think this is the year they do it. I think this is the year they break through and get to the Super Bowl. And then the other side, I have 2 seed Packers against the 1 seed Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm taking the Bucks. I thought about this one a lot when I was picking this before the show, and I just think the Bucks they're their overall roster. I think they're more well rounded, and I also just think they match up incredibly well with the Packers. With the level of talent they have on their front seven, they're going to be able to stop the run, which is going to be the heart of this Packers offense, which we mentioned earlier. So I think that's where they're going to get the advantage. And then from there, once you stop the run, a lot falls on the shoulders of Aaron Rodgers in this passing game. And I think they can do enough to slow down these receivers. So I have the Bucks and the Bills in the Super Bowl.
We got here different ways, but we have the same Super Bowl. At the end of the day, I'm high on the Rams, but it's hard to win. Well, it's hard to get back to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years, although it's not impossible. And with the team that they have, I think they could do it. But it's also hard and harder to beat Tom Brady in the playoffs back-to-back years. And at the end of the day, I think with that Bucks front seven, the loss on the offensive line of a veteran like Andrew Whitworth, the loss of a guy in the secondary like the guy they lost, forgetting his name right now, and a couple other veteran pieces, I think the Bucks will find a way to get it done. And maybe we saw whatever it was, the pre-retirement from Tom Brady that lasted 40 or so, whatever days. I think he gets back to the Super Bowl. And if he does win or lose, I think that's probably going to be his final game for real this time in the NFL. But I'll probably be wrong on that. So we got there in different ways, but I do think the Bucks, if given another opportunity against the Rams, will find a way to win. Although I think the Rams probably have the advantage at head coach, which can really come into play come playoff time.
Right.
But we'll see.
Exactly.
We will see.
Yeah, we shall. And I do think that's a really good matchup for a conference championship game. But do you have anything to say about the AFC conference championship game?
Conference championship game?
Yeah.
I think did I skip that?
Yeah, you skipped that. I don't think you mentioned it.
Well, if I didn't, I think this year it's the Bills' year. I think I said I have the Bills and the Bucks in the Super Bowl, but I just didn't
Yeah,
talk
I was
about
just saying
this
like
game
why,
in particular.
but it's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I
can
just
move on
think
if you have anything to add.
the defense, now that I think about it, for the Chiefs worries me, but I also think the Bills' defense got better. Tre'Davious White's coming back. You get Von Miller in there. You have pieces that are improving year after year up front. And maybe the flip of the coin goes in the Bills' direction this year. Who knows? But they did change that rule, I believe. So, I just think it's the Bills' year. I picked them to go 14-3. I think they're stacked top to bottom. I think Josh Allen's fantastic, and he's going to break through one of these days.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think the difference this year is the Bills' pass rush. I think Ed Oliver is going to take a step. I think Gregory Rousseau is going to take another step, especially under the wing of a guy like Von Miller. I think it's the perfect, mentor for a guy like Greg Rousseau, who I think he was a tight end or just like an athlete coming into college. He's still learning the defensive end position. So a guy like Von Miller helping him out is going to be fantastic. Okay, now we get to the Super Bowl, and we have the same exact matchup. I'm just going to say I have the Bucks winning the Super Bowl. I'm just going to say this before I get into the analysis. Like, how fitting would it be to have Tom Brady's last game in the NFL be against his longtime foe in the AFC East? Not much of a threat for much of that time. But the team he terrorized so many years, he gets to play them in the Super Bowl in his final game and beat them. How fitting would that be? But getting into the analysis, though, um, you have the contrasting, explosive offense in the Bills and the more methodical passing game in the Bucks. But it's really tough to choose between who I want to pick. But I gotta lean towards the Bucks just because I question the Bills' ability to push the pocket in the interior. I know I literally just said a second ago their pass rush is much improved, but that's also against a different quarterback. That's against Patrick Mahomes, a guy who holds the ball a lot, and most of the time, if you're watching Patrick Mahomes, you want your strength on the edges. Against the Brady, it's different. You want pressure on the inside. That's how you get Brady uncomfortable. Is get people right up in his face. That's how it's always been. That's how it's going to be this year, and that's where I have questions about the Bills. They could prove me wrong. Like I said, I think Ed Oliver could take a step this year, but I'm taking the Bucks.
Just for the not that I disagree with you, but just for the sake of disagreeing, because I want to, I'm going to take the Bills. And I think, I'm just really high on the Bills. And look, this has been an absolute blast. I really don't have any analysis. Once these games actually happen, we'll be talking about them so much more in depth. I just am a huge believer in the Bills. This has been an absolute blast. This predictions episode every year ends up being a monster. But Emmy and I are going to do a good job in finding a way to maybe split this thing up so it's more of a manageable listen for you guys. But I do think that this has been a blast. And look, there are going to be picks that both of us will probably nail. There is every year. There are also going to be some predictions that are going to probably make us look stupid. But that's just the name of the game. We've been doing this for a couple years now, and we're used to it. But look, this is just, we're up here recording at 1:35 in the morning, finishing off this podcast. This is just the amount of dedication that we have, not only putting out great content for you guys, but we love our football. And I think you guys know that by now. So just a couple announcements before we sign off. Number one, be on the lookout for the last of our division previews, which are coming out probably later tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. And then we'll try to have this predictions episode split up in a way that's manageable for you guys by the end of this weekend. Like by Sunday's games, we want to try to have this up so there's no questions of 2020, that sort of thing. Predictions before the season starts. So we'll have all this content up for you guys. And then I think starting on Friday, if not Friday, then definitely next week, we're bringing back our weekly picks against the spread episode, where we preview that week's games and make a pick against the spread. And it'll kind of be a friendly competition between Emmy and I throughout the entire season like we had last year. The only difference will be we won't be picking every single NFL game every week. We're going to be picking the top 5-6 NFL games on that week. We're going to pick those games against the spread, talk about them. And then we'll also be picking, I don't know, depends on the week, but the top 2-3 college games as well. So we get our fair share of college football in as well, which I think will be a nice change of pace. So be on the lookout for those weekly episodes starting hopefully on Friday, but if not, then definitely next week. But once again, if Emmy doesn't have anything else to say, and do you?
Just want to say I'm happy football's back. That's it.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and sign us off, man.
Yeah, so make sure, once again, like, subscribe, keep up on the lookout for all this content that we have. But I guess Enjoy tomorrow night's game. It's a fantastic game. Bills Rams opener. I mean, it doesn't probably get much better than that. And then we have a fantastic slate of games, both in college and the NFL, which we'll hopefully be talking about on Friday for you guys making our picks. And it was a fantastic week one of college football. There were so many good games and there's still so many good things. But I guess just like Texas's chances of beating Alabama this weekend, and just like the NFL offseason, come tomorrow night, we are going. Peace out, y'all.
Peace out, guys.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to click on one of these two videos right here, our latest video right here on the left, or the video YouTube recommends for you on the right.